Test, test. Good afternoon. My name is Rod Huckabee. I'm presently an investigator with the District Attorney's Office. However, I've spent the majority of my career as a sergeant with the Sheriff's Office, and this being my 35th year in law enforcement, starting back when I was 18 years old. Before leaving the Sheriff's Office years ago, I began a project to honor who I found to be the first law enforcement officer killed in the line of duty in this area, a man named Solomon Gladden. Now, this was discovered in my research for this monument behind me here. During my investigation, I also discovered another law enforcement officer killed in the line of duty, Hanford City Officer Fred Byrd. Both of these men's names are inscribed on this monument behind me. And sadly, I note that I've worked with 4 of the 6 men inscribed here. It's very important for us as law enforcement officers and for the citizens of this county to never forget the price that is paid for the security of our nation, our state, and our communities. These men gave their lives in that pursuit, and it's wrong if we ever forget them for doing so. There's a saying that I once heard that applies today, and it goes something like this: as long as people tell stories about me, I shall live forever. Well, today, Solomon Gladden and Officer Byrd will have their stories told. Hanford Officer Fred Byrd was 32 years old and had been on the force for about a year when he was shot. He was described by the community as an excellent officer, vigilant, brave, conscientious, while also possessing the physique required for his duties, it was noted by the paper of that time. Several months prior to December 26, 1893, somewhere near midnight, Officer Byrd responded to a complaint of an individual named John Harris threatening people with a knife in front of Wheat's Saloon. Apparently, Officer Byrd was familiar with Harris, dealing with him many times in his duties. Harris was described as being a dangerous man, having been involved in several other cutting and shooting sprees prior to this one. Now, on a historical note, Harris's brother James was involved in one of the historical events here in Kings County called Muscle Slough Shootout, where his brother, as one of the settlers, was shot and killed by members of the U.S. Marshals posse. Officer Byrd approached and disarmed Harris, allowing him to be taken home by friends to sleep it off as opposed to arresting him. Several hours later, Harris came back out and this time was armed with a pistol, saying he would kill Officer Byrd. Officer Byrd found and disarmed him, locking him up in the city jail. Harris swore he would get even. December 26, 1893, a little after midnight, Harris attempted to make good on his threats. While playing cards in the Artesia Hotel at 6th and Irwin, Harris noted Officer Byrd checking in on the barroom several times during the night. Apparently, Harris became angry that Byrd was looking in, and after the card game ended, Harris went outside. As Officer Byrd walked down the street towards the Artesia Hotel, Harris concealed himself in the alcove entrance of the business. As Officer Byrd approached, Harris jumped out with pistol drawn and said, "You SOB, I've got you now." Harris fired 6 shots, striking Officer Byrd twice. Officer Byrd fired his .45 caliber pistols multiple times, striking Harris in the stomach. Officer Byrd advanced and tackled Harris to the ground while Harris continued to fire his now empty revolver. Officer Henshaw heard the shots, arrived to assist Byrd, and ended the struggle. Harris died of his wounds hours later. Officer Byrd was cared for by the citizens of Hanford until January 16, 1894, at 5 p.m. when he died of his wounds. It was initially believed he was going to recover until he started hemorrhaging and bled to death. The city of Hanford offices were draped in mourning, and a resolution passed by the council at that time that all businesses would be closed during Officer Byrd's funeral. The newspaper of that time stated, quote, "Our citizens will join us in saying, 'Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Peace to your ashes. Though you are dead, you will not be forgotten.' And today, we tell your story, Officer Byrd. Your courage and sacrifice are not forgotten. And I promise you that it will not be another 100 years before we tell you your story once more." And I note that during my investigation, we found that Officer Byrd's headstone is missing, and that the city council and the chief are working to resolve that issue, and he will have a headstone. The next officer I'll speak of is the one that started my journey years ago, and that's Solomon Gladden. The history about this shooting is unfortunately written more towards the story of Tomas Procopio Bustamante, due to his association with the noted bandit Joaquin Murrieta, who was his uncle. However, once you start looking into his background, you see that it was Procopio who was the real bandit. He was known by several AKAs, one being Red-Handed Dick. In 1872, the San Francisco Chronicle called him, I quote, "one of the most fearless and daring desperados that has ever figured in the criminal annals of our state, end quote. Procopio ranged far and wide in his criminal activity. He killed, he raped, and he robbed his way across California. In July 1863, Officer Wood of the San Leandro Police Department attempted to arrest him for rustling. Officer Wood got the drop on him, and Procopio feigned submission to arrest. As Officer Wood holstered his weapon and went for his handcuffs, Procopio drew his own gun and shot Wood. He then ran from the scene, pursued by citizens. As they closed upon him, Procopio fired again, wounding another officer. Eventually, he was captured and sent to San Quentin. Upon his release from prison, Procopio resumed his old criminal ways, and after a cattle rustling incident, Monterey County Sheriff Harry Morris shot and killed Procopio's partner during a posse chase. Procopio got away. He then teamed up with another famous bandit, Tiburcio Vasquez, who sacked the town of Kingston during his criminal ways. And they robbed and pillaged their way around Monterey County. September 1871 saw a posse find and attempt to arrest this gang. Another shootout ensued, with the posse killing one of his gang while the others got away. Procopio was tracked to San Francisco, where Sheriff Morris found and attempted to arrest him, but not before Procopio tried to draw his gun and shoot the lawman. Sheriff Morris was a little quicker that day and grabbed Procopio by the throat, pinned him to the wall, and effected the arrest. Procopio returned to San Quentin, a pattern we still see to this day with criminals in the revolving door. Upon his release, he again continued robbing and rustling across the valley. On November 12, 1877, Procopio and his gang robbed Brownstone's store in Grangeville, making off with $250. They then traveled south to the town of Caliente in the Tehachapi Pass, robbing several stores of about $300. The lawmen captured all 6 members of the gang, but not Procopio. Later that night, vigilantes hung all 6 gang members, and I quote, after a fair trial. On December 26, 1877, Procopio and his gang robbed the Hanford store of Phillips and Wineshinch. They took several watches from customers and about $300 in cash. A call from local law enforcement went out for posse members to be sworn in for the chase. Only 5 men stepped up to do the right thing and help protect their community. Solomon Gladden was one. Gladden is listed as a harness maker from Lemoore. His history notes that he was a Civil War veteran in Company I, 32nd Ohio Infantry. Records indicate that he and his brother enlisted together. What brought Gladden to California, we don't know. But it was also noted that Gladden was to be married soon. So let me set the scene like this. It's the day after Christmas. It's cold and foggy, like we know it to be in the valley in December. Most folks are celebrating with their families in a nice warm house. A call goes out from local law enforcement for help in capturing noticed vicious bandits to form a posse, be sworn in, leave your family at the holidays, and go out into the cold and fog to hunt a vicious killer and his gang known to shoot law enforcement when cornered. Now I ask you, how many citizens, even in today's world, would raise their hands to do that? Solomon Gladden spoke up and said, in essence, send me, I'll go, when he raised his hand and became part of the sheriff's posse. Deputy Solomon Gladden would never return to his harness-making business, nor would he be married to the woman he loved. Solomon Gladden would die while doing the greater good of protecting his community. The posse that day consisted of Jose Cunningham, Doc McPherson, Solomon Gladden, Bill Dykes, and Joel Whiteside. It was said that they were not heavily armed when they quickly left in pursuit of Procopio. It was a bitter, cold, and foggy day as they tracked the gang west towards present-day Coalinga. That night, they stopped at a cabin to rest. One of the posse members went outside to gather more firewood and encountered a male carrying a saddle through the fog. During a short conversation, the male asked for directions to a nearby Mexican settlement named La Libertad. Joel Whiteside, who knew Procopio on sight, sounded the alarm after hearing Procopio's voice. The bandit dropped his saddle and ran into the fog, disappearing. At daybreak, the officers tracked Procopio to Gus Kreinhagen's store near Poza Chene. This is at the bottom of the hills near present-day Coalinga. Kreinhagen confirmed Procopio had been there an hour earlier at about 3 o'clock. Kreinhagen said that Procopio had headed up Jacalitos Creek, where it's known that the Higuera brothers had a cabin. The posse rode up and encountered one male outside who refused to speak. As they entered the cabin, they found 4 males playing cards who were surprised to see them. The males quickly got up and went outside. As the posse moved deeper into the cabin, they spotted Procopio on a bed, asleep, with a large coat over him. Whiteside, covered the 4 males with his pistol, and told McPherson to cover Procopio with his rifle while Whiteside called in the rest of the posse. As Whiteside called out for help, he turned back to see Procopio coming up out of bed with 2 pistols. Procopio immediately began firing. As Gladden rushed in, he was shot in the face, and then as he turned, through the side. Posse members retreated back outside the cabin, pouring rounds into the doorway. Procopio exchanged gunfire until the posse members were out of ammo. Before they could reload, Procopio sprang from the doorway, grabbed the downed Gladden's pistol, fired 2 more rounds, and disappeared into the fog. Later, reinforced posses from Hanford and Lemoore gave chase, tracked him to Monterey County, but never did catch up with him. On December 28, 1877, Solomon Gladden died doing what all of us do in this line of work. He ran towards the sound of gunfire. He did not retreat, he did not surrender, and he did not leave his partner when he called out for help. He died in 1877 as much as a lawman as any lawman today. Solomon Gladden is buried in the Grangeville Cemetery with a simple headstone, noting that he was a Civil War veteran with no note of his involvement in this incident with a well-known, notorious bandit of the day. Well, as of today, Solomon Gladden's new headstone, over here in the back of the truck, will note the historical significance of what occurred. I want to thank Andy and Lacey from Hanford Granite for donating the time and material for the new headstone. And I also want to thank Joyce Batista and the Lemoore Cemetery District for their help in seeing this project completed. So in the end, I want to leave you with this. Let it not be another 100 years before we speak of these officers' sacrifice. Because remember, as long as we tell their stories, they will live forever. Thank you.